Before we begin, a warning. What you're about to hear isn't gossip. It isn't PR. It's a story about control and what happens when even the most disciplined man in Hollywood finally loses it. It began like any other morning in television. Bright studio lights, polished smiles, a friendly stage designed to look harmless until it wasn't. But that day, on The View, something ancient stirred beneath the surface of celebrity politeness. Something raw. Something real. Because when Tom Cruise, Hollywood's eternal perfectionist, sat across from Joy Behar, television's unfiltered firebrand, the world didn't just see an interview of worlds. Crimson versus provocation versus provocation. Silence versus spectacle. Faith versus fear. The episode was supposed to air on November 8th, another cheerful morning filled with trending topics and easy laughter, would carve its way into pop culture history. A moment when decades of restraint finally snapped, and the truth came pouring out. The cameras hadn't even started rolling when the crew noticed it. That unmistakable Tom Cruise energy. Calm, focused, unnervingly precise. He arrived 1 hour early, alone except for a publicist who barely spoke. No entourage, no ego. Just a man who moved through the chaos of television like a soldier returning to familiar terrain. "Morning, everyone," he called out, flashing that cinematic smile that had sold billions in box offices. "Hope I'm not too early." But early was Tom's natural state. He'd built a career on being ready before the world even woke up. He shook hands with every camera operator, resigned names within minutes, asked the makeup artist about her weekend. To the crew, it was textbook Cruise. Flooring manners, machine-like discipline. But behind the easy warmth was a mind always measuring the room. And then, just past 9, the hosts began to arrive. Philip's Whoopi Goldberg, warm, grounded, the quiet mediator. Haynes, bright and bubbly, a fan first and journalist second. Sunny Hostin, observant, composed, always analytical. And finally, Joy Behar, the sharpest voice in morning television, the storm behind the smile. She entered like she owned the air around her, heels clicking, coffee in hand, expression unreadable. He'd been doing this too long to show nerves, but she did show intent. The crew saw it, that tiny glint behind her glasses. Misinformation because the subtle stillness before the hunt. "Tom, wonderful to have you," she said, her tone perfectly polite. "Joy, thank you," he replied, still warm, still easy. "I've been a fan of the show for years. You all keep it real. I respect that." Joy smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried an aftertaste. "Oh, we definitely keep it real here," she said, and for a moment, silence. A silence too sharp for morning television. Whoopi shot her a look, the kind that said don't start. But Joy didn't need to start yet. She was waiting. In the green room, Tom sat quietly, reviewing the talking points for his latest film, Shockwave Protocol. To him, it wasn't just another blockbuster. It was a personal mission. A story about morality, about what violence does to the soul. He'd fought for scenes that the studio wanted to cut, moments where the hero breaks, weeps, questions everything. He believed audiences needed to see that. Tensions of strength, the woman cost of strength, vulnerability beneath control. Little did he know that within the hour, that same theme would come to life. Not in a film, but in front of millions, unedited and raw. 12 a.m., the cue light flashed green. Applause filled the studio as Tom Cruise stepped onto the stage. It was supposed to be routine, a quick 12-minute segment, A few laughs, some talk about stunts and inspiration. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi said brightly. "We are thrilled to have the Tom Cruise with us today." The crowd cheered. Tom smiled. Precarious, advertising. Too smooth. Too smooth. About training, about the grueling months of preparation. Tom told a charming story about a young co-star terrified of heights, how he spent 3 weeks helping her conquer it. The audience laughed. Cameras panned. Everything was safe. But then, around the 10-minute mark, Joy Behar leaned forward. Timber body shifted, the way a boxer shifts before throwing the first punch. The audience didn't notice, but Tom did. She smiled. "Tom," she said, voice sugar sweet, "can I ask you something?" The phrasing was off. Crimson wasn't a question, it was a trap dressed as permission. "Of course," Tom said, still polite, still open. Crimson's smile didn't move. "You talk a lot about discipline and values," she began, "about being a role model for the next generation. But how do you reconcile that with some of the choices you've made in your personal life?" The words hung in the air like poison smoke. A calculated strike, perfectly timed. Misconduct seemed to inhale and freeze. Whoopi's eyes flickered. Sarah's smile evaporated. Simmons in the control room, a producer, whispered, "Oh no." And for the first time in 40 years, Tom Cruise didn't smile. It not the audience, not the hosts, not even the air. Tom Cruise just sat there, perfectly still. Posture straight, eyes calm, expression unreadable. But beneath that composure, something shifted. It was subtle, microscopic, the kind of flicker only a camera with 1,000 frames per second could catch. The practiced smile was gone. In its place, a silence so sharp it could cut glass. "I'm not sure I follow, Joy," Tom said finally. His tone was soft, dangerously soft. "What choices are you referring to?" Whoever today's Joy Behar leaned back, her shoulders loose, her grin almost playful. But the glint in her eyes told another story. "Well," she said lightly, "you've been married 3 times. You've had some colorful relationships. And you've been involved with some very controversial organizations. So when you talk about values, mentorship, personal responsibility, I think a lot of viewers wonder, how does that square with your own life?" The audience reacted before Tom did. A ripple of discomfort moved across the crowd like a gust of cold air. A few nervous laughs, silenced. A cough from somewhere in the back row. In the control booth, a producer muttered, "Cut to commercial?" Lingering voice answered, "No, not yet. Let's see where this goes." Helsinki Whoopi shifted uneasily. "Joy," she began. But Tom raised a hand, not to silence Whoopi, but to steady the moment. "No, it's fine," he said quietly. "Jang, to Joy, you want to talk about personal life and professional conduct. That's fair. Let's have that conversation." He turned his chair slightly to face her head on. The air in the studio grew heavier. Joy blinked, surprised by how calm he still was. Pham began, "Yes, I've been married 3 times. And no, I've never discussed those marriages publicly because I believe in protecting the people I care about. Their pain isn't mine to turn into entertainment." A hush fell over the room. Tom's tone wasn't defensive. It was precise, the kind of precision that only comes from deep control. "But you see," he continued, "what you're really asking isn't about my marriages, is it? You're asking whether a person's private life disqualifies them from having professional integrity, from mentoring others, from speaking about discipline or values. So tell me, Joy, does it?" The question wasn't rhetorical. Wait. And for a moment, Joy had no answer. "I'm just saying," she started. Tom interrupted, his voice firm but calm. "You're implying." The landed like a thunderclap. The other hosts exchanged glances, Whoopi's eyes pleading ease up, Sarah biting her lip, Sunny looking down at her notes like they were a shield. But Joy wasn't done. Shimmer wouldn't let her back down. "You're involved with an organization that's been accused of some pretty disturbing things," she said, leaning forward now. "People deserve to know if that influences the way you—" Stop. One word. Quiet. Final. The audience gasped. Tom's eyes locked onto hers, not angry, but laser-focused. "Let's be clear," he said. "We're not having a conversation about professional ethics or art. What you're doing right now is attacking my personal beliefs and my private life on live television for ratings." Joy's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair," Tom cut in, his voice low and deliberate, "is pretending that this is journalism. It's not. It's entertainment disguised as concern." His voice grew steadier, sharper. Each word hit like a gavel. "You want to talk about work? Fine. Congestion of my films, my crew, my colleagues? Fine. Misinformation, and when you start using someone's faith, someone's personal pain as a weapon, that's not a question anymore. That's cruelty." The word cruelty hung there, heavy and echoing. A few audience members clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. Joy crossed her arms. "I'm just doing my job, Tom." Tom's eyes narrowed. Calm, deadly calm. "No, Joy, you're doing a performance, and that's the difference between us. I do mine on camera where everyone knows it's fiction. You do yours behind questions." The control room went silent. Flooring, the segment producer, whispered, "He's turning it around." Salmon tried to recover. "Tom, I think the public deserves transparency." "Then let's be transparent," he said, leaning forward. "Let's tell them the truth about what just happened here. You were waiting. You let your co-hosts build a nice, comfortable interview. You smiled, you nodded. You waited until I let my guard down and then you struck. That's not transparency, Joy. That's strategy." The audience murmured. Whoopi looked down, rubbing her temples. And then, for the first time in the entire show's history, Joy Behar blinked. A tiny tremor in her armor. Unsuccessfully. Tom noticed. He didn't press. Not yet. He simply let the silence stretch, let the weight of his words fill the air until the room itself seemed to breathe slower. "Here's the truth," Tom said, voice softening. "I don't owe anyone a perfect image. I owe people my best work. That's it. That's all." He turned slightly toward the audience. "And I've shown up for 40 years. Early, prepared, respectful, always. I've never missed a call sheet, never disrespected a crew, never walked away from a job. That's the example I try to set. Not perfection, commitment." Before a wave of applause began to build, hesitant, uncertain, then louder. Joy sat back, eyes burning. For the first time, the sharpest tongue in daytime television had nothing to say. And that's when Tom smiled again. Not the polite Hollywood smile, a colder one. Stiffness of a man who'd just taken back control of his own narrative. For a brief, electric moment, the studio was suspended between two realities. The television show everyone had come to see, and the truth unfolding live before their eyes. The laughter was gone. The warmth was gone. All that remained was the hum of studio lights and the unblinking red of live cameras. Joy Behar shifted in her seat. The faint sound of her bracelet clinking against the table was suddenly deafening. "You know, Tom," she began, her voice quieter now, almost too casual. "I think you're overreacting. This is just a conversation. You're the one turning it into a spectacle. Tom tilted his head slightly, studying her like an actor watching a scene he'd already seen rehearsed 100 times. A single breath, then another. And then, softly, "No, Joy. You turned it into a spectacle the moment you decided I was the story." Her jaw tensed. "I didn't decide anything. The public decided. They have questions." Tom's expression let the public ask them. But don't pretend you're their voice. You don't speak for them. You speak to them, and there's a difference. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Someone whispered, "He's right." Zhang leaned forward, trying to regain her rhythm. "This isn't personal," she said. "You're one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. People have a right to hold you accountable." Tom's eyes darkened slightly. His tone, still calm, took on a weight that filled the air. Accountable for what? For working too hard? For showing up every day and doing my job? Or for refusing to apologize for believing in something? The audience was silent. Every camera caught the flicker of emotion behind his words. Not rage, but pain. Deep, exhausted pain. "You know what's funny?" he continued. "For years I stayed quiet. I smiled, I played along, because I thought dignity meant silence. But maybe dignity means speaking when silence becomes complicity." He leaned back, almost whispering now. "And you, Joy? You've built a career out of turning silence into spectacle." Joy opened her mouth, but nothing came out. In the control booth, one of the senior producers muttered, "He's controlling the tempo. We can't cut now. This is live gold." But down on stage, it didn't feel like gold. It felt heavy, like history. Tom clasped his hands together on the table. "Let me tell you something, Joy," he said softly. "When I started in this business, I was a kid. I didn't have money, I didn't have protection. All I had was a dream and a work ethic. And do you know what I learned very early on?" Joy didn't respond. The room held its breath. "That this industry doesn't destroy you with failure, it destroys you with exposure. The moment you become human, the world starts carving you apart, piece by piece, until you either break or build armor so thick no one can reach you." He paused. "Maybe that's why you do what you do. Because watching someone else break makes people forget they're breaking too." The silence that followed was not the silence of television. It was the silence of realization. Fishing Whoopi finally spoke. Her voice was cautious, maternal. "Tom, I think what Joy is trying to say is..." Tom turned to her gently. "I know what she's trying to say, Whoopi. She wants a confession, a headline, something viral. But all she's getting is honesty." He turned back to Joy. "You said people see a contradiction in me. Maybe they do. But contradictions make us human. They don't make us hypocrites." Joy's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not quite anger, but something close to disbelief. "You really think people will buy that?" she asked. Thompson leaned forward, just slightly, and the tone of his voice changed. For the first time, there was heat. "I don't need them to buy it, I just need them to see it. Because what you just did here, Joy, what you do every day, is why people stop trusting the media. You don't seek truth, you seek weakness. You want to see people bleed so your audience feels something." Joy froze. There it was, the first real blow. Tom wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His words were knives wrapped in calm. "You call it journalism, but it's not. It's hunger. It's the need to take someone who's done the impossible and remind them they're still human. because God forbid a human being survive without your permission. Jeff the studio erupted, half in applause, half in stunned disbelief. Whoopi's hand shot up. Okay, let's keep it respectful. But Tom wasn't done. He looked right into the nearest camera. Respect starts with intent, Whoopi, and intent is what divides conversation from attack. Joy's lips parted, but her eyes betrayed her, wide, unsteady. For the first time, she looked cornered. Tom exhaled slowly, visibly pulling himself back from the edge. I didn't come here to fight, he said quietly. I came here to talk about a film that means something to me. A film about moral cost, about the weight of violence. But maybe this, he gestured around the set, is the real thing people need to see. The moral cost of conversation. Which Whoopi's gaze softened. Sarah swallowed hard. Slashing looked like she wanted to stand up and leave. Salmon, Joy just stared at him. The mask was slipping on both sides now. What began as an interview had turned into something else entirely. Not just a confrontation, but a mirror. And everyone watching saw themselves in it. The air inside the studio had grown thick, not from temperature, but from tension. Every breath felt weighted, as if even the oxygen knew something irreversible was happening. Stiffness Joy Behar's smile had vanished completely. Her eyes, usually bright with defiance, were now dark, unreadable. But pride, that old familiar armor, still held her upright. She leaned in, voice steady but stripped of its earlier playfulness. Tom, this isn't an ambush. I'm giving you a chance to address what people talk about behind closed doors. You're a public figure. Stop, Tom said again. Not loud, but final. The word froze them. Room. Then, in a voice that dropped into something deeper, something raw, he continued. You keep saying, the public. You keep hiding behind them. But let's tell the truth. This isn't about the public. This is about power. Joy, power? Yes, he said. Because this is what it looks like when media power tries to humble human truth. The audience murmured again, caught between awe and discomfort. Thompson continued, each sentence landing like a drumbeat. You don't want conversation. You want control. You want to shape a headline. Tom Cruise snaps. You want that clip, that soundbite, that moment where the machine eats the man. He looked straight into the camera now. Well, here's your headline, Joy. Here's your moment. I'm done feeding the machine. A chill ran through the room. Even the lighting seemed colder. Tom, Whoopi said softly, almost pleading. Let's just take a breath. Tom turned toward her, eyes filled with restrained fire. I've been taking breaths for 40 years, Whoopi, while people like Joy turn them into smoke. He shifted in his seat, the motion slow, deliberate, powerful, like a soldier standing from the wreckage of a battlefield. He faced Joy directly. Do you have any idea what it takes to survive in this business for 4 decades without becoming cynical, without losing your soul? Every day, you walk into rooms filled with people who want something from you. A smile, a quote, a controversy. And you give until one day you realize they're not applauding you anymore. They're applauding the version of you they built. He leaned forward, voice low, trembling with emotion. And when you stop performing that version, they turn on you. They call you fake, cultish, unstable, anything to remind you that you were never supposed to be human. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Joy's usual retorts had dissolved into breath. Tom stood. The simple act of standing shifted the energy of the entire stage. It was no longer Joy Behar's show. It was his arena. He looked down at her, not condescendingly, but with the kind of quiet sorrow that comes from disappointment, not anger. You want to know why I keep showing up early? Why I shake hands with every crew member? Because they're the real ones. They don't play games. They don't chase headlines. They show up and work. That's what I respect. He sit here in judgment, calling it conversation. But what you're really doing is feeding a culture that teaches people that tearing others down is entertainment. Helena turned slightly toward the audience, his voice rising, trembling now with something deeper than rage. Conviction. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? How many lives it's ruined? How many people have been destroyed by 10-second clips that tell half a story? Every word echoed like thunder in the silent studio. This, he gestured to the set, the cameras, the blinking lights. This isn't truth. This is theater. And for too long, I played along. I smiled through the rehearsed questions. I swallowed the bait. I gave the polite answers. He leaned down toward Joy, his voice almost a whisper. But you made a mistake today, Joy. You forgot that even actors have limits. Joy's lips trembled, the words forming but never leaving. I'm a journalist, she said finally. Tom smiled, but it wasn't the Hollywood smile. It was razor thin, honest, human. No, Joy, he said softly. You're a storyteller, just like me. The only difference is, I admit it. Studio erupted in applause. Loud, defiant, real. Whoopi tried to intervene again, but it was too late. The moment had already become legend. Tom removed his microphone, the motion slow, deliberate, symbolic. 40 years, he said, voice steady now. 40 years of 18-hour days, broken bones, silence. Watching people I love get ripped apart because the truth wasn't entertaining enough. And today, right here, I'm done pretending that silence is strength. He looked directly at Joy. You call this accountability. I call it cruelty. Dressed up, polished, packaged for broadcast. He turned toward the audience, his voice rising one last time. If you're watching this, if you've ever been judged by strangers who don't know your story, hear me. Your mistakes don't erase your worth. Your faith doesn't make you a target. And your dignity isn't up for debate, no matter how many cameras are pointed at you. A long pause. Then, quietly, some things are more important than staying in the chair. He placed the microphone gently on the table. Missing, a single click, echoed louder than any applause. And then Tom Cruise walked off the set, not storming out, not escaping. Jimmy, tall, steady, composed. Anthony didn't need music to feel cinematic. Whoopi's voice cracked. We'll be right back. The screen cut to commercial, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. Because the moment Tom Cruise left that stage, something in the culture shifted. Just slightly, but permanently. The studio door swung shut behind him with a soft thud. Not dramatic, not angry, but final. The kind of sound that carries weight long after it fades. For 5 full seconds, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Miss The View, a show built on constant chatter, had fallen completely silent. Joy Behar sat motionless, her eyes unfocused. The color had drained from her face. Whoopi stared down at the table, her hand still hovering near the mic that had never found the right words in time. Sickness Sarah Haynes wiped at her eyes. Sunny Hostin looked like she was praying. Beige in the audience, the energy had shifted. The thrill of live drama replaced by a stunned, heavy quiet. Then, a single pair of hands began to clap. It was hesitant at first, almost uncertain. Then another joined. And another. With a third of the audience was on their feet, applauding a man who had just done the unthinkable. He didn't shout. He didn't lash out. He just walked away, with his dignity intact. Backstage, Tom's publicist hurried to catch up, her face pale, eyes wide. "Tom, do you want to issue a statement? We can spin this." Crimson, he stopped walking, turned to her. "No spin," he said softly. "Let it breathe." Those 3 words would later define the entire fallout. Within hours, the clip exploded across every platform. Millions watched in disbelief as the once smiling superstar dismantled a TV institution live without raising his voice. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Cruise Walkout. Hashtag Enough is Enough. Hashtag The View Meltdown. Late night hosts dissected it. Podcasts debated it. Media critics called it the most important on-air reckoning of the decade. Even rival networks replayed the footage, frame by frame, analyzing his posture, his tone, his control. The question echoed across headlines. Had Tom Cruise just exposed everything wrong with modern media? Joy Behar released a statement that evening. It was a passionate exchange between 2 strong personalities. Journalism isn't always comfortable, but the damage was done. Her words, clinical, dismissive, were met with a storm of backlash. Audiences saw what happened. They'd felt it. They weren't debating professionalism anymore. They were debating empathy. Whoopi kept quiet for days, then finally broke her silence with a single line on air. Sometimes, strength isn't about staying seated. Sometimes, it's about standing up. Sarah Haynes posted on social media, "Some moments in television aren't scripted. They're necessary." And Sunny Hostin simply said in an interview, "It was the first time I saw someone refuse to let the machine win." As for Tom Cruise, he said nothing. He didn't tweet, didn't post, didn't clarify. He just went back to work, quietly, steadily, promoting Shockwave Protocol, the movie that suddenly everyone wanted to see. Audiences poured into theaters not just to watch the action, but to witness the man who walked away from manipulation and still stood tall. The film became a box office phenomenon. Critics praised its emotional depth, its vulnerability. And when the closing credits rolled, people found themselves thinking not of explosions, but of that morning on The View. Because what they'd seen wasn't just a celebrity defending himself. It was something primal. A human being reclaiming his voice in a world that profits from taking it away. Israel that followed, networks quietly changed policies. Producers were instructed to brief guests more clearly to avoid ambush-style questioning. The View's tone softened, and Joy Behar, once the queen of confrontation, began showing glimpses of reflection, or at least restraint. Someone said it was growth. Others called it damage control. But one thing was undeniable. The line had been drawn. The morning Tom Cruise walked into that studio, he was an icon. When he walked out, he was something else entirely. A symbol. A reminder that sometimes silence isn't peace, it's suppression. That sometimes kindness is mistaken for weakness until it finally speaks. And that the greatest power any person can have is the courage to say no to being reduced. In the end, the confrontation lasted less than 15 minutes, but it changed everything. The show, the audience, the culture. It reminded the world that the most explosive act isn't rage, it's restraint. Frustrations. The most cinematic moment isn't the punch, it's the pause before you walk away. The screen fades to black. Aaron line appears. Strength isn't in the spotlight. It's in knowing when to step out of it. Fade out. Tom Cruise, the man who walked away.